This is another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. We are all hardcore wrestling fans who have realized that, just from watching wrestling, that sometimes it doesn't make any sense. And now we're going to talk. Well, you know what? We got a special guest on the show. So let's talk to him first. Hi, we got Corey on the show. Hello, Corey.
Hi.
Who's your favorite current female wrestler, and who's your favorite legend female wrestler, if you will?
Favorite current female wrestler. Let's see. If I had to narrow it down, I think Becky. There's anyone right now on the WWE roster who is as over as Becky Lynch in the opposite way that they want her to be over. Just a testament to how great she is. And all time, I would have to go with Akira Hokuto. She's Japanese, obviously, but she did a lot of wrestling in WCW in the mid-90s, being managed by the great Sonny Ono. And I was a WCW kid growing up, so when it comes to a lot of that wrestling from that mid-90s period, that's where a lot of my knowledge comes from.
Nice. I didn't watch a lot of WCW, so I have no idea who that is. It's a great.
She's great. Look her up. She's got crazy entrance gear. I think Asuka times 10.
Ooh, okay, awesome. John, who is your favorite current female wrestler, and then who's one of your favorites from back in the day?
I'd go for probably Sasha Banks. I think because a few years ago, back in her NXT heyday, man, she was killing it. She was probably the best wrestler in the company, I thought, at that time. And just putting on great matches with everyone. I'd get goosebumps when her music hit, because I was that into seeing her wrestle and stuff. So, yeah, I'd say Sasha Banks for sure as the current one, even though she has been a bit sidelined, I guess, on the main roster in recent years, I guess. It's been a bit of a weird one since she got promoted. But in terms of a legend, I'd probably go for Molly Holly, I think.
Ooh, that's a good pick.
Yeah, she was just completely different from all the other kind of divas at that time in the Attitude Era, whereas they're all pretty much heavily sexualized and stuff, and Molly Holly as part of the whole Holly gimmick as well, with Crash and Hardcore. It was just a total breath of fresh air.
Molly Holly kicks ass, man. There's some WrestleMania where she I can't remember who she wrestles. I think it's Victoria in a loser loses her hair match.
I think it was Trish. Was it Trish?
Was it Trish?
I think it was Trish.
Well, do you know the story behind that?
No.
Apparently the story is that there were no women booked for that WrestleMania, and Molly Holly, understandably, because she was the champion, I think, at the time, she was like, dude, you gotta put the women on the show. I'll and she literally was like, we'll do anything. And she pitched this, she pitched that idea. She's like, I'll get my hair shaved off, I'll do it, but just fucking, you have to put the women on the show. And they were like, okay. Guess who's losing their hair, But I thought that was really cool of her to, to stick up for, that's ridiculous that there was no women's match booked for WrestleMania that year. And I can't remember, I may be mistaken, but wasn't that the year that fucking Donald Trump was on WrestleMania?
That was WrestleMania 20, so I think it was a bit before Donald Trump came around. But yeah.
Well,
yeah, I want to say Trump was 2004, 2003.
Oh, was it? It wasn't. No, it was not 2003.
It was in the mid 2000s. I think I was in high school at the time.
I don't think it was 2003. But yeah,
because that's when he was managing Bobby Lashley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He managed Bobby Lashley against Vince, who was managing Umaga.
Yeah,
that's right.
Oh, no.
And coincidentally enough, Vince got his head shaved.
Yeah, so they must have been different WrestleManias because they wouldn't book two head shaving gimmicks on the one WrestleMania. That would be tacky, and the WWE is certainly not tacky. No,
and that was after the ECW revival as well, because I'm sure.
No, that was before the ECW revival, because when he was ECW champion, he had like a do rag and he had his head shaved.
But that would have been like 2006 or 7 then.
Oh.
Either way, we're getting way off topic.
So the point is, Molly Holly did
certainly
that.
Are. Let's talk. We're gonna have a women's wrestling podcast where we're gonna talk about Vince McMahon
about Bobby Lashley
and Donald Trump. God, you're terrible at this.
Yeah, it's just not a good start for the show, huh? Let's have a do-over. My point was that Molly Holly did a really good thing, and that was commendable of her. And it's ridiculous now that we've got to this point where we've just had a women's only pay-per-view to even imagine a show where women wouldn't be booked on the card. Ridiculous. But let's talk about Evolution a little bit. I was really looking forward to it. I know there wasn't a whole lot of build up to it, or not as much build up as there should have been. Other than saying this is a big historic thing we're doing, but you didn't really lots of things are historic. That doesn't mean they're worth watching. You know what I mean? You have to build us up to it and get us interested. But I thought, despite the lack of build, it was a really good show. It wasn't perfect, but there were some really good matches on it. I really liked the NXT Women's Championship match.
Hell yeah.
I really like that. Just because I like both of the women involved. Because they're so beautifully contrasted against each other. Kairi Sane is this lovely, sweet princess, and she's all fun and colourful. And then Shayna Baszler is just a fucking monster. She'll just crush you, with no remorse whatsoever.
Shayna Baszler is probably one of the more intimidating people to see in person too. Probably about a year or two ago, I was at an NXT live event in Columbus, and there was a spot that it was like Dakota Kai versus I think Lacey Evans, and after Dakota Kai won the match, Shayna Baszler just jumped through the crowd, climbed through the crowd on the opposite end of the ring, and she just looked terrifying, just pushing past fans to get over the barricade.
Yeah, dude.
But yeah, very scary in person.
And that works. It's a great look, and it really makes her stand out. You know what I mean?
It's the way how she carries herself as well. You totally believe she's a genuine badass who'll, tear you to shreds if you got into a fight with her.
You legit fucking think that she'd rip you, in pieces just for fun.
Yeah.
She's really good, and she's picked it up really well.
I think she's probably one of the best heels, of male or female, in the entire WWE as well. Because she's just a total pure heel.
Yeah.
She's not trying to go for cheap pops or anything. Her promo work is fantastic as well.
Yep.
It all makes sense and just, comes across as a legit badass.
Yeah, dude, she's...
Well,
really
Shayna...
good.
Well, I was going to say, Shayna went through the independent circuit for a couple of years. So she had a lot of seasoning on that. And, I mean, her character it works because she absolutely, it's her dialed up to 11 or 10. So, I mean, it makes total sense. She does carry herself like a monster. The way she has this kind of that casual cockiness of someone that knows that if she's going to get into a fight, she's going to win it. So there's this kind of carefreeness about her that makes her even more terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. That she knows she's hardcore, and that also she just does it for fun. But you get that impression just from watching her, and just the way she like you said, all her mannerisms and stuff. She's very, very good. She's picking
And that whole like arm spot that she does as well, like bending it backwards on the mat and then stomping on it, is just one of the most disgusting looking spots in all of wrestling, I'd say.
Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to watch. So yeah, I really enjoyed that match. Although I'm a big Kairi Sane fan as well because she's a pirate and I love pirates. I was so happy that she won because she was who I was rooting for in the first Mae Young Classic, and then she won the thing, and I'm like, what the fuck? Really? Pirate Princess? Alright, I'll take it. But she's awesome. She hits the best top rope elbow ever.
Yeah.
It's just the best, you know.
Eat your heart out, Randy Savage.
Listen, man, Macho Man was good. I mean, he's number 2. But Kairi Sane, I think, is number 1. Hits the best elbow. Bayley's pretty good too. But that's it.
Yeah, we'll give it that.
Yeah, Bayley's pretty good. I mean, her top rope elbow is pretty good. And that's what I meant. What else happened in Evolution? Loads of other stuff. Obviously the classic last woman standing match, which was Becky Lynch versus Charlotte. Both of those women are incredible. I think they're both super, super good. I love Becky Lynch just because I love hearing a Dublin accent on like American television. So I love Sheamus as well. Like I get that accent so much. It's beautiful, and it's really weird to hear it. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I hear that accent all the time, and and we just live in tiny little Ireland, and then they're, you know, on the main stage, and they're talking like us. Well, not like me, but you know, it's nice. One problem I had with that last woman standing match, which really annoyed me, in that classic like fucking smart way, you know, like, oh, I can't believe they did that, was the questionable like definition of to your feet that the referee would, you know, there were a lot of times whenever somebody would be on their knee. There was one time Charlotte was on her knees and the referee stopped the count, and I'm like, that ain't, she's not to her feet. And then this was like right before the spot where Becky did the elbow off the ladder to the table.
Yeah.
So then Becky does that, and then she covers Charlotte with all the crap. And while she's doing that, and Becky or Charlotte is on the floor, the referee does not start the count, which I thought was weird.
Well, apparently that's more down to the fact that the referee can only start counting once, like the action comes to a stop, pretty much. Okay. So because Becky's piling all the crap on her, he has to wait for her to finish before he can start counting.
Okay.
Well, that's how Edge explained it on Twitter to some troll who tried dissing the match anyway.
Well, right up, whenever Charlotte does get to her feet, she's not really on her feet that time either, and the referee waves the count off. And then right at the end, whenever she goes through the table, she tries to get back to her feet, and that looks way more like getting back to her feet than the other 2 times that the referee waved the count off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to sound like a big nitpicky idiot, because the match itself is really good. I think we can all agree.
Hell yeah, it's fantastic.
It kicked a lot of ass. It had the magic ladder. Do you remember that? Where the ladder stood up by itself?
Oh, yeah.
Magic ladder. And then Becky, because she's a heel, she like knocked it over. Oh, that bitch. I can't believe she would do that. But yeah, that match was really good. And it was really good to see those two get the kind of time that they deserved. That was a really good match. And
I kind of wish it was the main event of the show as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a problem.
I understand the whole thought process of making like Ronda Rousey like the headliner and everything, because she is, you know, the one that they're putting everything behind pretty much at this point, and rightly so with her background. But Yeah, it would have been nice to see like Becky and Charlotte get that recognition and get the top spot.
Well, what was always going to hurt Becky and Charlotte is that they're the SmackDown title feud, and Raw will always be positioned over SmackDown. The same thing has to do with like how the Universal and WWE titles are handled. The WWE title is the one with all the history and all the lineage, whereas the Universal title is the one that has not many people holding it, and a lot of the reigns not being that great. But because it's the Raw one, it's going to get preferential treatment.
Which is ridiculous because it is not the good one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pretty much just like.
And
well, yeah.
What I was going to say is I really liked the spotlight that Becky Lynch is getting, because if we're going back to the NXT days, like when John was talking about Sasha, Becky was always the fourth wheel. Bayley was, Charlotte was a strong champion. Sasha was the villain of the show, and Bayley was the plucky underdog that had to work her way up. Becky was just kind of there a lot of the time. So to see Becky get that kind of recognition, and for her to be putting in the best, performances, both character-wise and ring-wise, it's nice to see that she's been getting rewarded in this way.
I would agree with that. I also kind of felt like that whenever you watch Becky Lynch in NXT. You knew that she was good, but you never really I never really thought that she got the kind of prominence that the other three did.
No, definitely not. Well, the other three, didn't they actually all win the NXT title, women's title, but Becky never did?
Yeah.
No, never won it.
And then
Becky's first title was the Smackdown title. She was the first women's Smackdown champ. That was her first title in WWE.
Well, that's it. Like, whenever they all got called up to the main roster, 3 of them went to Raw and 1 of them went to SmackDown. Right? Becky went straight to SmackDown, and Charlotte and Sasha and Bayley were all on Raw.
Yeah, when they did the brand split.
Yeah. So again, it's like, SmackDown might be seen as the B show, and they were like, well, we'll just put Becky Lynch on the B show. But, the problem we have is that SmackDown, a lot of the times, ends up just being really better than Raw. In all of the divisions. There was a while where I would enjoy watching SmackDown, especially the women's division, more than Raw, because Raw had a lot of good talent but didn't know how to use it, whereas SmackDown was way better at giving all of the women the right amount of attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when SmackDown started, Becky Lynch was a champion, and then they were able to give the other women on the show enough TV time and enough kind of stuff to do and enough feuds that they all looked relatively important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's where Carmella really rose to prominence, too.
Mm.
Yeah, who'd have thought Carmella would do that well?
Yeah, so once again, it was a situation where she was the third wheel in a very popular act. And what happened to those two?
She ended up being the best one.
Yep.
Also, like Alexa Bliss.
Yeah, true. Alexa Bliss didn't do almost... She was more of a manager in NXT.
Right, and then once she hit the main roster, I thought with her and Carmella, I'm like, well, those guys they're the weak links, so they're not going to do anything. And by golly, Alexa Bliss turned it around. She's one of my favorites now because she is great. I love her.
Mm.
She's so
It's
good.
a shame she wasn't cleared to compete in Evolution, really, because... she really deserved to be in that match with Trish and Lita.
Well, that's true, but I was really happy to see Alicia Fox get a shot because Alicia Fox hits the greatest, most beautiful looking Northern Light suplex that anybody has ever hit. But
that's that's pretty much the only good thing she does.
Probably the only good thing she does, but it's worth it.
I will say this about Alicia Fox. I think that her longevity has a lot to do with how she presents herself. Anytime they've given Alicia Fox something to do, in my opinion, she's knocked it out of the park. And that's going to, when they first introduced the cruiserweights to the Raw brand and they paired her up with Noam Dar.
Oh, that was so.
That
good.
was a great storyline,
It was.
And that had almost all to do with Alicia Fox being, knowing her character and playing it well, and Noam Dar just looking like a little pervert the whole time.
Which he was very good at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, dude. Well, that was the thing that really made me kind of, take another look at Alicia Fox, because for a long time I didn't really pay any attention to her. But once she started doing that, that's it, man. All you gotta do is fucking give these guys TV time and give them stuff to do, and then they get, it's easier for them to get over. Because then I'm like paying more attention to Alicia Fox, and now, I think she's a good wrestler. I mean, she missed that spot in the tag match.
Yeah, she didn't break up the pin in time.
Which was a bit weird, and it was a bit of a shame. I'm like, dude, this is your moment, not the time to fuck it up, But she seems like a competent hand in the ring. She's not...
I mean, she's been in the company for, I think, it's either her or Natalia that have been there the longest.
Yeah, it's surely over a decade now.
Yeah, I think Alicia Fox has been 12 years, maybe.
Yeah.
She came in originally as like the wedding planner for Edge and Vicky Guerrero, I believe.
Oh, wow. That's a long time
Way
ago.
back in the day.
Yeah. Well, she's done pretty well for herself. What do you think?
Should we talk about Trish Stratus and Lita coming back to the ring for the first time, properly in ages as well? Because, I mean, I thought they both, turned back the clock pretty much. They looked way better than I thought they would, considering, how long it's been since they've had any kind of, singles match or tag team match or whatever. I thought they came in and, just looked like they did, back in 2004, 2005 when they were at their peaks.
Trish looked amazing. She kicked ass in that match.
It's kind of a ridiculous, too, considering it's been, a decade more since Trish Stratus was, a very active competitor. And what surprised me was Lita had so many injuries towards the end of her run. For her to be as seamless as she was is just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you would not have known that it's been, 10 years? Longer than that they were properly, since they last had a proper run.
Yeah.
And they look really, really good. Yeah. Although Lita continues her tradition of not properly landing a moonsault. My one problem with Lita is that I don't think she's ever hit a proper moonsault. I've yet to see her hit a moonsault properly.
I always fear for her safety when I see her doing it.
And that's her spot.
It's her
that
fucking
was
move.
Back in the day that was back when she was managing the Hardys. You could always count on Lita to get involved and hit that moonsault.
She'd do the moonsault, but her arms would
yes,
hit
I
the
know
guy.
she hit it.
And I'm like, dude, this is your move. Get it right,
It's you can count on Lita for that, a head scissors, basement drop kick, and a twist of fate.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just cool to see her do it. You know what I mean? The spectacle of it took away from the fact that she very rarely hit it.
Oh yeah.
It was just yeah, she did a moonsault, yeah, because that was really in the era when women just did not wrestle. That was I remember those days.
Yeah, I mean, her and Trish, and really two names that get forgotten in that time period as well are, Victoria and Ivory. There was a very good, base of female wrestlers in the Attitude Era. It's just they didn't get used very well. But I mean, Victoria was always good. Ivory was always good.
Ivory was always good. This is the reason I want to do the podcast, guys. Because I fucking love Ivory.
I served it up for you.
I started watching wrestling in 2000, but I never watched Raw or SmackDown because I didn't have the channel that put Raw and SmackDown on. So now that I had the network, I went back and kind of watched all those old shows that I never got to see. And the one thing that stuck out was how good Ivory was, despite the fact that she was constantly being given shit to work with. I used to love seeing Ivory on TV because she, you know, she would maximize her minutes. She would take whatever TV time she had, and she'd make sure that you remembered it. You know, because there weren't a whole lot of spots out there for the women. So whenever she was given any kind of TV time, she'd go out and take it. And this was at the time whenever she was like wrestling. Oh, who was around then? The Cat. Was around then.
Yeah.
This was the weird spot.
I think she actually lost her women's title to the Fabulous Moolah at the time.
There was a weird spot with Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young came back, and so Moolah beat Ivory, and then Ivory beat her in a not good match. But again, Ivory did her best, and then, you know, won it off Moolah again, and then she lost the belt again in like a gravy bowl match, which is where there was just a paddling pool filled with some kind of liquid, supposedly gravy, and they all just like wrestled in it. I can't even remember what, like, I think it was like an evening gown match as well, so whoever lost their fucking clothes or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just garbage, and the Cat won it because she couldn't win a proper wrestling match. And I just felt so bad for Ivory, but then after that she went to the Right to Censor and killed it again because she's a pro and she knows what she's doing. But yeah, that always stuck out to me, that like a lot of the shows on like Raw and SmackDown on like 1999, 2000, they weren't always great. There was a lot of like crap going along.
Mm-hmm.
And I always enjoyed seeing Ivory because I knew it's the same with Mae Young as well. I didn't like how they brought back Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah because it was just out of nowhere, and then Moolah won the belt for some reason, and it didn't make any sense. And then they kind of dropped Moolah for a bit, and they would just keep Mae Young around because she was money. And she did the same thing Ivory did. Every single time Mae Young came out, I knew something was going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, you just knew she would just come out and climb into the ring to wrestle, and like somebody else would be having a match, and she'd just come out and try to get into the ring, and the referee would stop her. So then she'd try to fight the referee, and then she'd try to kiss the referee, and I'm like, she is the greatest human being. She just like, she had like what age was she? Like 90 by then? She was like 80 or 90, and she still had so much fire in her. She was ready to go. You know what I mean? Like, I wish the match had been Mae Young versus Ivory, because that would have been a way better match. Unbelievably, I know for a fact that Mae Young would have fucking did whatever she could to put on a fucking good match in the 2 minutes that they were given. You know what I mean?
Now, didn't Mae Young appear topless in a WWF pay-per-view at one point?
Yeah, I think she did.
Yeah, she was down for anything.
It was the Royal. That's exactly it, dude. She was down for anything, and she didn't give a fuck. And you could tell, and I loved it. I think it was the Royal Rumble 2000, right? When they had a bikini contest, and she was
it was the Royal Rumble, yeah.
She was like, "Does anybody want to see puppies?" And like, normal people are gonna say, "No, dude, keep those." Keep those puppies locked up. But because there was...
I don't think it was an actual like breast that she exposed, though. I think it was she was given some fake breast, wasn't she?
Dude,
I have no idea, and I don't want to know.
If I know Mae Young at all, I can imagine her at the back fighting with Vince and saying, "No, we're using my boobs." It's my fucking boobs. But like, the audience in the Attitude Era, whenever Mae Young was like, "You guys want to see some puppies?" They were all like, "Fuck yeah, we do. I don't care." They were all like, "I don't care whose they are. We want to see boobs." And so Mae Young was like, "Here you go." And everybody was like, "Fuck yeah, there's some boobs." You're like, that was their limit. They were like, "Boobs, please. Doesn't matter whose. I'll take them." You know, it's why Rikishi got over. Right? One other thing I wanted to talk about Ivory about was, I was super excited that she got inducted in the Hall of Fame, because for a long time I was afraid. I'm like, she was so good, and I didn't think other people knew how good she was. And then she got inducted in the Hall of Fame, and like, that's awesome. So I was having a great time. Then I found out she was going to be at Evolution in the Battle Royale, and I'm like, well, Battle Royals are like, whatever. And she got loads of fucking TV time.
Yeah.
She was like, what, last 5?
Something like that.
Yeah. And
she was right in there.
Right. And she had a dance off and everything. Man, she had a great old time. So the point of that last 20 minutes is that I love Ivory. I was very excited to see her.
To go back to the tag match between Trish Stratus, Lita, and Alicia Fox and Mickie James. Mickie James is kind of in that same realm of almost forgotten about. Like, there's this weird period of time in professional wrestling in the mid-2000s where it was like John Cena, Randy Orton, and then a bunch of people they tried to make big deals and then gave up on.
Yeah.
Mickie James was kind of the women's division for a long time because that was really in the thick of these hiring sports models.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Mickie James is also, like I said, someone who's just incredibly underrated. I saw her at an independent event. It was her first match back from having a baby, and she wrestled Ember Moon, and it was just incredible when you consider the fact that she had just had a child a few months before.
Yeah, dude, she's great. She's a really good.
She's super talented, and you know what? The WWE have touted Evolution as the first all-women's pay-per-view, but as I'm sure we all know, TNA had their own all-women's pay-per-view way back in 2013, I think it was. And Mickie James is the only one, the only woman who was on both of those pay-per-views. So
nice.
Says something about her right there.
Do you know what I really liked about that match was when Trish was in the ring and she she points at Mickie James on the apron. She's like, "I want Mickie," and then Alicia, tags Mickie in, and the crowd is like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
they still remembered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck that. It really it brought a tear to my eye because I'm like, I remember that too.
That was really refreshing to see as well. The crowd itself was so into pretty much the whole show.
Yeah.
And you don't often get that with women's matches on Raw and SmackDown. Unless they've got a character that has been pushed to the moon or they're really invested in. A lot of the time, even now after the whole women's revolution and stuff, people will sit on their hands almost, stay quiet, and don't always give them the respect and cheers and stuff that they deserve. So it was awesome to see all the reaction that they were getting in this show.
Yeah.
Well, what was really good about Evolution is because it was a show that was promoted this is going to be an entirely women's pay-per-view. Everyone that was there were there because they wanted to see an all-women's pay-per-view. That's why that crowd was so hot. You had a crowd full of people who wanted to be there. And I think of that, we're not ever going to do this topic justice. I mean, we are 3, white, rapidly approaching middle-aged men. Rapidly approaching middle-aged men.
It's so close.
And so, we won't do the topic justice. But, like I said, there's this really very passionate fan base of female wrestling fans, of non-gender identifying non-gender identifying fans that are super passionate about women's wrestling and are irritated by things like how the WWE handles them. So this was an opportunity for them to go to this event and show them this is what we want. If you will give this to us, we will wholeheartedly support it. Because the main roster has always been weird about how they handle the women's division. NXT has always had a strong women's division. Impact has traditionally had a strong women's division. The independents are littered with strong, women's companies, if not divisions in other Japan has they have an entire not even just fan base, but seeming division of their Japanese product are just all women's promotions. So, like I said, we won't ever do this topic justice because we are three, rapidly approaching middle-aged white men.
Stop going on about the middle-aged.
But yeah, like I said, the Evolution was a great crowd because it was a crowd of people who wanted to be there and a crowd of people who wanted to show the WWE that they are wholeheartedly ready to support things like this.
So here's the question, though. Would the WWE be better off doing something like they do with, like 205 Live or NXT UK or whatever, giving the women roster their own show rather than trying to give them, 10 minutes here and there on Raw and SmackDown? Would it be better for the women division to have their own concentrated show where they can just, tell different stories and have that chance to build up feuds and whatnot and build up characters and put on something different to what they do right now?
Well, do you mean
I think there's... Oh, sorry.
Well, do you mean that as in addition to them being on the main roster, or do you mean like a totally separate identity? Because
205 Live was supposed to be on Raw originally as well, and they kind of did that for a few months and pretty much tossed it out the window.
Right.
So I'd say, a bit of both.
But I think that keeping the women on the main TV is an incredibly important thing. I think if they just said, yeah, we'll have a women's only show, but it's only on the network, fuck you, no women on the main show, that's really not a good move.
No, that's essentially making the, Raw and SmackDown just the men's shows then.
And that would be really boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd not be opposed to having like a women's only kind of brand where, like an extra show where storylines could play out without the constraints of the TV time, but also have the main players on the TV. It's like kind of like main event, but for women. You know what I mean? Something like that where you can still do all that stuff, but you can also have the women on the main roster on the main shows because that's the exposure they need.
But I think you run into an issue where, the WWE has almost like 10, 11 hours of weekly content. And it's kind of adding another hour to that is giving an opportunity for people to skip it. And I don't think you want to do that with that kind of brand. Like 205 Live is a niche brand, and they're treating it like a niche brand. Like a 205 Live show is going to be basically independent wrestling with a budget.
Yeah.
And in the NXT UK show, NXT itself is already on the network. This is just an offshoot of it, saying, "Hey, we're going to give you something else that's like NXT, but over here." Like you said, I think it's to kind of go on Dylan's point. It's incredibly important for the women to remain on the main roster. Giving them their own show, though, I think gives a lot of opportunity for really lazy writing to just say, we're going to do all the storylines on the women's show and we'll throw some stuff on the main roster, but we got to really make sure that, the universal title or this particular male storyline needs to stay prominent.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
I think it's awesome that they did an all women's pay-per-view. I think an all women's brand for the WWE would be more trouble than what they need. I'm not going to say more trouble than it's worth, but it's going to open up a lot of potential for them to make a lot of really dumb mistakes. And and if anything in recent news has shown us, the WWE is very capable of making dumb mistakes.
Yeah.
I think it sends out a bad message as well, like almost saying, well, the women aren't good enough or they don't belong on the main show, so we have to put them off on like this side show as well. So
exactly.
If anything needs to have its own show that we're gonna have our own show. They should just put the tag division on its own show. Yeah. That's a separate topic entirely.
Well, speaking about that though, they were speaking about tag teams, they were talking about, or there are rumors that they're going to be bringing in tag team championships for the women. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's a great idea. I think that they have the level of talent needed, but I don't think they need 3 tag divisions. I think they would be better off. I mean, back when they first did the brand split, was there not just one tag team championship?
Yeah.
It might be. And it basically would travel between brands like the Undisputed title did.
Yeah,
I think they would, if they combined the Raw and SmackDown tag titles, because, I mean, both divisions are really lacking in depth for tag teams right now.
Mm-hmm.
They could get away with just having 2 tag belts that go between shows where one's a men's tag division and the other's a women's tag division. Because I think between both shows, you have a strong tag division for both.
Well, that's what I was thinking about for the women's tag titles. I thought that right now, the smart thing to do would just simply introduce one set of belts. You don't need 2 tag belts, one for each show. That's way too much. You're gonna oversaturate yourself. You're just gonna run out of, like, whenever TNA did that, they brought in women's tag belts, which seemed like a really cool idea. But the problem is they just didn't have the talent to go along with it. They didn't have enough tag teams, and that's why that got forgot about, because they didn't have the people behind it. I think right now, if you have a certain pool of talent, both gunning for the Raw and the SmackDown singles women's championships, you still have enough people left over on both sides to have a strong tag team division, but for only one set of tag titles. They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, they could bring up more and more women from NXT to justify having 2 women's tag team championships, but then they're just going to run out of time and they're not going to be able to use them right. Whereas if you have one set of belts on either show, it's going to flow better.
Well, and you have to also look at just how they treat their current belts anyway. There are weeks where Shinsuke Nakamura is not on SmackDown, and he's the United States champion. So, I mean, they can't treat a lot of the belts they currently have right. So unless they start consolidating, adding more is just going to be more divisions just getting forgotten about.
Mm.
Yeah, well, don't even get me started on the shoddy booking that they've been doing these days with regards to I think that's maybe going to be our next one we'll do, where we just talk about, like, some of the fucking not good booking. It always annoys me whenever they forget about champions like that. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, we'll cover that in a different podcast. But
sure.
Yeah, I think they kind of need to be smart about it. But they have they're slowly but surely setting up tag teams. Although I can only offhand really think of 2, maybe 3. I can think of 3. Sasha and Bayley be a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, Alicia Fox and Mickie James can be a tag team while Alexa Bliss goes for the main belt. And you've got the Iconics on SmackDown.
You also have the Riot Squad and Absolution.
Ah, the Riot Squad. I forgot about the Riot Squad, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is about the current WWE, I mean, just as a character, like, if you were to look at it from a pure character perspective, what benefit is there to be in a tag team in the women's division? There's no tag titles. So why does it benefit Sasha and Bayley to be, we're best friends and we're going to hug and we're going to be in all these tag team matches? There's nothing to gain.
Right. It seemed like a weird kind of thing for them to do whenever there weren't... Because when they started doing that, I think it seemed like they were going to introduce tag team or women's tag team championships, like, relatively shortly after that. Because you're like, here's a tag team that could be tag champions one day, And then, like, a couple of months have passed and they haven't really done that. Although, like I said, I feel like they have been kind of planting seeds for other tag teams in a hypothetical division. So,
but I think the whole Sasha and Bayley thing, though, was to try and get to the bigger picture of a feud between the 2 of them, which has basically never materialized. Like, the whole idea behind it is that they just dropped the ball from the outset. And it's been really weird, like, seeing how, like, they were sowing seeds for this way back a year ago, if not longer. And it just, there was never any kind of end point in sight with the whole storyline, it seemed. And yeah, now they've got they've just decided, oh yeah, they're best friends again. So it seems like they are just giving up on the idea of having them feud and saying, well, let's put them together because we're gonna bring in some women's tag team titles.
See, that's why I thought that the tag team titles were going to come up, because I thought that's what the blow-off to the feud was going to be. I thought the blow-off to the feud would have been Sasha and Bayley winning the tag team championships, and then, like, Sasha turning on Bayley or something like that, and making the championships, like, the focal point of that feud, because then you could say Sasha just did it so she could get tag belts or whatever, and now she wants a different partner. And you have the feud like that.
You're describing what is happening with Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins right now.
Yeah,
they just realized that storyline. They're like, "Oh, that might be too good to use on Sasha. We'll put that on Dean and Seth."
Exactly.
Yeah, and then they were going to get a third person. They were going to start wearing military SWAT style uniforms, come through the crowd.
Although, wouldn't that have been fucking awesome?
It would have been incredible.
Sasha and Bayley just walking through the crowd, ready to fuck people up.
Sasha Banks is probably the person from the NXT call-ups that I think has been kind of done the worst. Has been Sasha. She has the most interesting statistic for a women's champion. She's been women's champion like what, 4, 5 times?
4 times.
Never successfully defended the title. She has been champion 5 times and lost on her first defense each and every time.
That's it's not good.
No, it's the weirdest stat in the world. But I mean, the WB has this thing about they seem to have one of 3 women that they love to push at one time, and for the longest time it was just Alexa Bliss and Charlotte.
Yeah.
And then they would like bring up somebody to feud against them. For one time it was Becky, another time it was Sasha, then it was Bayley. But it always went back to Charlotte and Alexa. And now they're putting Ronda into the mix because I mean, how can you not base a division around Ronda Rousey? And it leaves a lot of those people kind of out of the shuffle because they like to have, I mean, WB is, they like to have one person who is the definition. I mean, and that goes all the way back to Hulk Hogan and Bruno Sammartino. They like to have the one person. So that's the one thing always hurting the women's division is they don't have a secondary title, and they have other other performers and characters built. So a person like Sasha Banks, who was incredible in NXT, or Ember Moon, who was a strong champion in NXT, they're not going to get a lot to do.
And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before as well. Like, women don't necessarily get as much spotlight as they need on Raw, really, to kind of be able to expand the division and give everyone kind of their own characters, their own feuds and whatever. Like, it's not like a 50-50 split between the time given to men on Raw and women. So that's where maybe having their own show would be a huge benefit to them. Like, just to kind of, go on to a point about just kind of modern day WWE storytelling, and they have so many belts. They very rarely have just a grudge match. Almost every match on a WWE pay-per-view is going to be for title because they have so many. So you don't really even get a lot of those. This is a match between 2 guys who just really don't like each other. There's always like, and the Intercontinental title's in there too, or here's the U.S. belt. So I mean, for the women especially so. I think for a while you have that kind of feud where they're just kind of changing, who wins and who loses between like the Riot Squad and Sasha and Bayley, which we saw a match on Evolution for as well. But yeah, I mean, to go on to your point, they just do not have the time to give to them, which is insane when you think Raw is 3 hours long, and they can only have one main storyline for the women's division. And like I said, you look at SmackDown. SmackDown's 2 hours, and they keep forgetting to put their U.S. champion on the show.
Yeah, they have a real. This is a thing I've talked about many a time. The real awful awful booking of Raw whenever they got the extra R, because they never used it. They have an extra R to do stuff, and instead of like properly booking extra people onto the show or making more storylines they couldn't do when it was only 2 hours, they just fucking waste it and sponge it up with dumb segments that don't go anywhere and stupid fucking bullshit. Whenever,
well, did you guys ever play EWR?
Yeah,
like the booking simulator.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you used to get criticized in that game, where it's like, Batista's appeared too many times on the show.
Yeah.
There kind of needs to be a real life version of that, where it's like, hey, this is the 5th time Baron Corbin's been on TV tonight. Yeah. You might want to like throw some new blood out there or something. Well,
that makes sense because he's like the general manager or assistant general manager or whatever the fuck it is he's supposed to be doing. Like, that, for him to appear a lot kind of makes sense. But there's other times whenever, like they keep showing video packages for shit we don't care about, or that we already know, or that they've already talked about, or they
recap something that happened 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, like we don't need that. That's already happened. Fucking don't worry about it. And it's worse whenever SmackDown starts showing fucking replays of shit that happened on Raw as well. Like, you don't need this shit.
It'll be on Hulu in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it'll be on the fucking network in a month for some reason. But, yeah, I mean, their cack-handed booking is only going to be a problem for the women at the moment, because they have had to fight for the TV time that they get, and they've gotten to this point. You know what I mean? Like, they've got a women's pay-per-view out of it, which was really good. But also, once you go back and watch Raw and SmackDown, and you see the kind of TV time that they fought for, they still have to fight for a lot more. You know what I mean?
So, yeah. So, while we're on that topic, I mean, the WWE is not the only company guilty of this. Ring of Honor has a women's division. It's called Women of Honor. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it or not. But Ring of Honor, they have their own belt for the women's division. It took them 3-4 years for the women's division to get a belt.
Yeesh.
And the women's division's maybe 5 or 6 people. And they always put the women's division match. Because I've gone to Ring of Honor shows a couple of times now, and there's one this upcoming weekend. There's only ever one match, and they put it right after intermission. So people are just now getting back to their seats from intermission for the one women's match. So Ring of Honor just as guilty about how they handle their women's division. And if you want to even look at a show that a lot of people are calling the best show of the year, All In had one women's match. So for this, celebration of independent wrestling, there's a lot of promotions that are, full women's promotions, Shimmer and Rise, and they only managed to get one women's match, and they put 4 people into it. And I think Jordan Grace was put in the Battle Royal in the pre-show. So, I mean, like I said, WWE's not the only company guilty of this. It is across the board.
Yeah, it's like a whole mindset in all of professional wrestling that needs to kind of change, really. Not just for, giving women a chance and stuff, but, like, looking forward to, like, little girls and stuff who are, like, finding wrestling and stuff. This kind of, seeing women wrestling should be inspiring to them. And to little boys as well. It should be something that kind of, when they watch it and they see this, and it like teaches them that, men and women should be equal. There shouldn't be any kind of, oh, well, this is a women's match. Now I'm going to go to the toilet or go to the merch stand or whatever. Like, it should all be like, oh, yeah, awesome. Let's go watch this match and it will kick ass and it'll be great. So it's just getting that, like, mindset across to fans of all ages that, women's wrestling belongs on shows and it's worth being on shows. And there's nothing, wrong with it just because it's women wrestling rather than men. There's no tangible difference between it, it's still good stuff. So, yeah.
Especially when some of the women are equally as, if not more, kick-ass than the men. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Whenever I started watching wrestling, I never liked watching women's matches because at the time, women's matches weren't women's matches. If you watch, I would always watch the pay-per-views, and any women's match at the pay-per-view was like bra and panties match, or an evening gown match, or if it was a women's match, it was
bikini contest.
Yeah, if it was a proper wrestling match, it would be like 4 minutes long, and it would just never be that good. So I always kind of, shrug my shoulders at a women's match. It was always like, no, why can't? Well, but I was always like, why don't they just have a match? I used to get really annoyed at bra and panties matches because I'm like, I don't want to watch that. I have the internet. If I want to watch fucking porn, I'll go watch that. I don't want to watch it. I'm watching wrestling because I want to watch a wrestling match. So that was kind of my mindset for a while, and then I watched Survivor Series 2001. And the Women's Championship by then had been not deactivated, but inactive because China was the champion at WrestleMania, and then she left the company. So they just forgot about the Women's Championship for the whole Invasion angle until the very last pay-per-view of the Invasion angle, which was Survivor Series. And they had a six-pack challenge match for the belt with Lita, and I think Ivory was in it, and Jazz, and
Molly Holly
maybe, and Jacqueline. Those are the kind of guys. And Trish was in it, and Lita, I guess. So I was like not happy with this because I had seen Trish Stratus wrestle before in the matches that they had given us, and she couldn't wrestle. Like I didn't want to watch her at a wrestling match because she couldn't wrestle. And I watched this six-pack challenge match, and she came out, and she fucking kicked ass. And I was like, my opinion on Trish Stratus and on women's wrestling flipped, because I'm like, shit, dude, she did what I wanted. She fucking went out and wrestled a match, and she was really good. Compared to what the WWE had given us before with Trish Stratus, compared to that match, it was night and day, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Give me some more of that. The match itself wasn't fucking great. It's not a 5-star match. But they let the women wrestle. And I'm like, why don't you just do that more often?
Well, I think what's interesting about that is you brought up a name that I always felt was incredibly underrated for how good she is, and that's Jazz.
Yeah.
Jazz was one of the few women in the WWE that had a presence to her, like that kind of Shayna Baszler presence, where if Jazz was coming out, you knew someone was about to have a real bad day. And I think right now she's the NWA Women's Champion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, she's still out there doing it and doing it really well. But I think you mentioned that, it wasn't a 5-star match. I've never been a big fan of the star ratings. I feel like that's, everyone's entitled to an opinion, and to hold someone's opinion over someone else is just absurd. If you enjoyed the match, it was a great match.
Yeah.
And, it sounds like you enjoyed the match. So, I mean, that's awesome,
Well, no, I would agree with that. I think that, especially these days, a lot of people get way too bogged down in, the ratings and what other people think about it. I'm like, that's not what wrestling is. If you, for example, to go back to Evolution, the NXT Women's Championship match and the last Women's Standing match, 2 completely different matches. So if you were grading them, you can't really grade them the same way. You know what I mean? But you still had fun watching them, and that was the key difference. When you watched it, you had fun watching it. And you enjoyed yourself, and you could still say that they were both great matches, but for completely different reasons.
Hell yeah. It's part of what makes wrestling so cool. The whole variety you get with each match. Every match should be completely different. So they did their own thing in the last Women's Standing match. They did their own thing in the NXT Women's title match. they did their own thing in like the Mae Young Classic as well. I thought, Toni Storm and Io Shirai were two of the underrated like MVPs of Evolution. Like the way they came out and just built on what they'd already done in like the Mae Young Classic this year, delivered a hell of a match. And that's the kind of thing you want to see, like people just being able to go out and cut loose and put on the best show possible, regardless of gender or whatever. Like, this is what wrestling should be, like just a rollicking, good, fun time for the audience.
Yeah, exactly, man. Just let them go out and put on a show, and that's what you want. You want them to go out and put on a show and have a good time, and so you'll have a better time when you watch it. You know what I mean?
So I actually wanted to bring up a topic. John, you go to the Attack promotion a lot, do you not?
Yes, I do.
So you're real familiar with like intergender wrestling, because I know Attack does a lot of intergender.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on intergender matches occurring? I know it's very divisive.
Well, yeah. Like, before I started going to these shows, I was pretty much against it. I thought, men versus women, blah, blah, blah. It's like, men are strong and women are weak, blah. And I fell into that whole cliched kind of masculine viewpoint where, women can't compete with men. But then actually seeing it live and seeing not just how the women's wrestlers like going balls to the wall as they would, but like the men's wrestlers treating them with respect and kind of selling their moves and stuff as well. It totally changed my opinion on it. Like, I think there is a place in wrestling for intergender, like, and I think it can be done really, really well. So, yeah, it's weird. Like, I'd say probably about 2 years ago, I would have said, nah, not for me. I don't think it works at all. But now I'm, totally for it.
Well, that's one of the other things that reminds me of the Attitude Era when I started watching was that probably the only woman who was booked properly or strongly was Chyna. And that was because she would often, with no problem at all, just jump into the ring against anybody. And I really liked that because Chyna, whenever she wrestled, also gave off that kind of air of, I'm going to fucking kill you. More so, when she was in DX. But then after she kind of, came out of DX and was with Eddie Guerrero and stuff like that, even then you still got the idea that Chyna would happily beat you up. She was a strong woman and she could back it up,
Well, if anything, so there's this expression that history is written by the winners. The WWE has almost entirely phased Chyna out. Like, it's almost like when it's not as bad, but it's almost like what they did with Chris Benoit, where they kind of act like he was never there. Chyna doesn't get featured very often in any sort of promotional material for the women's division, because you're right, for the longest time, Chyna was the only woman that was booked to be a big deal.
Yeah.
And like I said, she's almost entirely forgotten. And you can come up with your theory or this theory as to why it happened, but it doesn't change the fact that it happened. A lot of people assume that it has to do because she did pornography after leaving the company. Others assume that it's some sort of grudge against parties that, it's not worth mentioning or getting into. But, I mean, at the end of the day, she got, wiped out. It's as if she was never there. Because I remember there was some fact that it was during the Royal Rumble, and they would mention, like, they would do the little facts about Royal Rumble, and they would say, like, Beth Phoenix was the second woman to ever be in the Battle Royal. They never mentioned the first was Chyna. They always pointed out that Beth was the second.
Well, here's the thing, man. Chyna was the first woman to be in the Royal Rumble, She was the first woman to win a male championship, which was the Intercontinental Championship. She was also the first woman to be in the King of the Ring. She was in the in the brackets for the King of the Ring tournament. She did all this stuff, and you're like, it's a shame now to see them not, especially now that they're doing this big women's revolution.
Yeah.
And they're talking about all the great champions of the past and all the great crap that they used to do. And it's a real shame to see that the one person that they really did treat like one of the boys doesn't get a mention anywhere. And I think China, out of maybe more than anybody else, deserves that kind of recognition, because she really was the one that went in there and kind of broke boundaries.
I mean, she had amazing matches with like Chris Jericho and Jeff Jarrett. I mean, she was putting on great matches, and and as you said, there's this whole laundry list of she was the first woman to do this, first woman to do that, and it's completely swept under the rug. And we, like I said, we revise history. So I am not the world's biggest Trish Stratus fan. I'm not going to say that she didn't contribute as much as she did, because for the longest time it was only her and Lita and Victoria. They were the only ones really putting on really good quality matches for women's division. China was first. China was first in the Attitude Era, because even then, if you go back further, you have great performers like Leilani Kai and Sherry Martel, and Rockin' Robin and Medusa. She's not Alundra Blaze to me. I'm a WCW guy. It's Medusa. but yeah, I mean, there was the women's evolution did not start at 1998. There's a very proud history of great female performers. I mean, the Jumping Bomb Angels, there was a women's tag division back in the late 80s. If you go and watch some of those old Royal Rumbles, because I did that about a year ago. I wanted to watch every single Royal Rumble, so I went through the network, and in one of the shows there was a women's tag division match, 4 belts, and it was the Jumping Bomb Angels, which were a team of Japanese professional wrestlers, against Leilani Kai, and her partner is escaping me, but I
Judy Martin.
Judy Martin, thank you.
Wow.
Were they both managed by? They were both managed by Jimmy Hart, I want to say. They had a manager. I can't remember who it was though.
I think it might have been Jimmy Hart.
Yeah, but exactly. So, it's history is written by the winners, and they are acting as if women's wrestling came about, because of pioneers like Trish Stratus and Lita. And no, it goes way back before then too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's weird that they're not really acknowledging that kind of stuff. And when you think they would, if they want to, well, they kind of hint at it. They had Alundra Blaze in the Battle Royale, but really, when you think about their promotion for that kind of time, the pre-Attitude Era, she's the only one they talk about.
Well, yeah, and she had these amazing matches with Bull Nakano as well. And I went to the Rise promotion, had a show out in Chicago in April of this year, and one of the big featured matches was a 6-woman elimination tag, and one team was managed by Medusa, and the other team was managed by Bull Nakano. Nice. Bull couldn't get there. Bull couldn't get there because of visa issues, but Medusa was there and it was hyped. And I mean, they wrestled each other at a WCW pay-per-view, like Hog Wild '95, I want to say. But yeah, I mean that's once again, there was great wrestling before the Attitude Era.
Oh God, yeah. I think that should be highlighted a lot more. That the real problem is that a lot of people get a little bit too stuck on the Attitude Era.
It wasn't that good.
No, dude, exactly. Having watched some of those old Raws and Smackdowns, I'm like, wow, I didn't miss anything.
No. I mean, it's the present paints the past with gold.
Well, that's the thing. I have a real problem with nostalgia, which is a subject I would very much like to talk about on a podcast that isn't wrestling based. Although it does have some connotations to wrestling, whereas people, once the internet hit, people, instead of just kind of thinking about the good old days, were able to talk to other people who also, thought highly of the good old days. And so the opinion turned from talking about the good old days to somehow thinking that if everybody's talking about how good stuff used to be in a certain time, then that's the way it should be now, which I think is a very backwards way of looking at things. But I think that is a way that people are starting to head towards now. I think a lot of people, especially with the internet and their interconnectivity, are able to network their own grievances about the problems they have today based on how they imagine it with rose-tinted glasses in the past. And I'm like, you can't live that way, because
is that why we're having 50-year-old DX versus 50-year-old Undertaker and Kane?
Exactly. Like, that's exactly the problem. The problem is those guys in Saudi Arabia wanted to see the old classics. Remember, John, I said to you last podcast that it was a guarantee that Hulk Hogan was going to appear at Crown Jewel because I knew that the Saudis they wanted to see the old guys that they remembered. They did that. That's why if you look at the fucking brackets for this World Cup tournament or whatever the fuck, it's like Randy Orton and Rey Mysterio and John Cena and, you know, Jeff Hardy. That's why. It's because it's these old guys that they like to see.
There's no one modern, yeah.
And that's exactly why DX and Undertaker and Kane are back, is because they want to see him. And instead of like, it's just a backwards way of looking at things. You can't because that's not going to be good. I love Shawn Michaels. I think he's the greatest wrestler of all time. But I'm going to tell you right now, Triple H and Shawn Michaels versus Kane and Undertaker in 2018 is not going to be great. And
no.
And
I'll be honest, I don't think I'm even going to watch Crown Jewel.
No, dude, I don't think I will either.
With everything going on, like, around it, with the whole murder and the controversy and everything, like, I'm like, oh, I just...
I think if you wanted to dive into politics for just a brief moment, to kind of just put your toe in it and move on, Vince McMahon's wife is in Donald Trump's cabinet. She's the Secretary of Small Business in the United States. So I'm not surprised that WWE were like, yep, we're still going to have it, because he himself is, our president is also, very cautious about saying anything bad about Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd heard that rumor where they were like, if they were told not to go by, the government, then they wouldn't go. But until they heard that, then they were just going to keep going. And that's probably because, they know how Donald Trump works, and they know that Donald Trump's getting a lot of money from selling arms to Saudi Arabia, which, I'll be honest, doesn't seem like a smart move.
No.
But
well, I mean, if we'll dive a little bit in there closer. The United States basically created the Taliban and created ISIS, if I'm not mistaken, by doing things like that. Oh, I'm sure you heard that, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Glad you picked up on that.
What are we talking about?
I don't know. Somehow we got into politics, and that was my mistake.
Well,
sorry.
Let me just say this: I'm not going to watch Crown Jewel because Ivory's not going to be there.
Yeah,
she was an Evolution.
As good a reason as any.
Right? That's all I need. Ivory's not going to be there, and Becky Lynch is going to be there, and they're shining examples of how good women's wrestling can be. Do you want to wrap this one up? We're like an hour.
Yeah.
Oh, if we could do like just kind of a quick bullet point touching.
Yes.
I was really happy to see that Nia Jax won a Battle Royal. I think Nia Jax is absolutely a woman that you can build a division around, and I think they haven't done enough with her.
Yeah, I think that they gave her a little run earlier. But was she injured? Was that why she had to relinquish the belt so quickly?
No, I think it's because they were building to Ronda.
Yeah, but
they wanted to get that belt on Ronda sooner rather than later.
Okay, because I would have you could have there's money to be made there with Nia Jax just destroying the competition. She's one of those people that, and I would have liked to see more of her. And it's nice to see her win the Battle Royale. I would have liked like Asuka or Ember Moon to have won, because those are two characters that don't have a direction anymore.
Which is insane to think that Asuka won the first ever women's Royal Rumble. That not even a year later, she's absolutely directionless.
That is a shame. I think it's a real shame that Asuka has been not doing as well on the main roster as she should be doing. because she's
that's
one
a
of my
whole
favorites.
other podcast right there.
It really is. I mean, that's going to go into our bad booking podcast. I really like Asuka, and it's a shame that she hasn't really had the kind of chance to kick more ass on the main roster, you know. Yeah, I'd also really quickly like to talk about Nikki Bella versus Ronda Rousey.
Mm-hmm.
Right before we wrap up, I really like Ronda Rousey. I think she's picked it up really quickly. She's really good at wrestling. She knows when to pull out the big spots, to pull out the big moves. She knows like how to sell stuff. She knows how to talk. One of my favorite things from WrestleMania, like probably the only thing I can actually like vividly remember from WrestleMania, because it was 68 hours long and fucking nothing happened. But in the tag match, Triple H and Stephanie versus Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey, there's a bit where Triple H is in the ring, but he's like, you know, leaning out the ring to yap at Kurt Angle or whatever. And so the camera's like cut in really close to Triple H, and then it cuts to like a wide shot where you see the rest of the ring, and it's just Ronda Rousey standing behind Triple H, and she looks like legit like she's about to kick his ass. And it was a beautiful thing, you know what I mean? Because she can do it, and she's not only been booked that she can do it, but like you know that she actually can. You know that Ronda Rousey could probably wrestle circles around Triple H right now. Ironic as it is, Triple H being the greatest wrestler of all time. But I really like how quickly Ronda has picked it up. And I think some people might complain that she's being pushed too much, maybe, but I think that given how far she's come with what she's been given in the short amount of time, I think she's a worthy champion. And I think that Nikki Bella was a worthy challenger, because I don't think that Nikki Bella is a terrible wrestler, and a lot of people do. And I think that the Bella twins, both of them, get way too much like criticism that isn't warranted by the internet wrestling community. I think they're way too harsh on the Bella twins, and because I think Nikki she can work. She's a really good wrestler too, and people don't know that because they are unwilling to acknowledge that. I think that people have a preconceived notion of the Bella twins just being two models that don't do anything, and have refused to admit to the fact that they have progressed and they have got better. Nikki especially, I think, is better than Brie, but they have got better, and they do a lot of work for the company, you know, on WWE TV and outside of it. They're well known, you know, they're the kind of people that WWE want, who can cross brands and be famous outside of the WWE. So I don't see why Nikki Bella wouldn't be a logical contender for Ronda Rousey for that pay-per-view. You know what I mean? The problem, had there have been a problem, was if they had made Nikki Bella win, because I think that definitely would have been the wrong move. But I never really thought they were going to do that, so I thought that we'll just see a pretty good match between two pretty good people. So yeah, I wanted to defend Nikki Bella a bit, because I don't think enough people do. I think she gets criticism that is unwarranted. I would also like to say that I do not think Nikki Bella is the greatest wrestler of all time. I just want to even the odds a little bit. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Oh, no, totally understandable. Like I said, I think Nikki's, Nikki did progress a lot, and the thing about her is she developed her own style. You know, for the longest time, the women weren't necessarily, the women's wrestlers were very more based off of quickness and more technical skill. Nikki Bella hit the weights, and she was for a while a power wrestler. Like her finish for the longest time, I can't remember what she called it, but I know Abyss called it shock treatment, which was like a torture rack that dropped. She stopped doing it because I think it messed up her neck. But
yeah,
you know, that's a power move. A lot of the women wrestlers were not lifting people off their shoulders to develop a move.
Yeah, And whenever they did, it would be a wrestler like, Nia Jax sorry, or somebody of that ilk.
Old habits.
Yeah. Do you want to get started in this? You know the wrestler called Mae Young?
Yeah.
Yes.
How come her name's Mia, but Nia is Nia? That doesn't make any sense. It should be Nia Jax. Back me up here, guys.
No, it should be Mae Young.
No, it should be the one I said. Let's not get too confusing about women's names. But usually it would be like a woman with that kind of look, if you know what I mean, that would do a lot of power moves. And Nikki Bella didn't look like somebody who could, do a lot of those power moves, and yet she would do it anyway. And people don't give her any recognition for any of that stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to say that about Nikki Bella. I feel so much better. I think that might be a good sign for us to wrap it up. But thanks for coming on the show, guys. Like Corey said, we couldn't possibly do this topic any real justice. Like, it would take us another podcast at least to go over. There's plenty more women's wrestling we could talk about. Plenty of women we didn't really get to talk about on this one. Plenty of other very important things. But we can do that on another podcast, I guess. Thanks for coming on, guys. And
not a problem.
And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening.